right, welcome back to the next chapter of Book Eaters Podcasts. I'm April Freeman.
And I'm Michelle Karsk.
And as always, the beautiful Iris Arroyo is with us. Today, now you may remember from last week's chapter that things got a little heated between Michelle and I when the subject of narrators came up. We had some minor
differences of opinion
about Jim Dale in particular.
Yeah.
And so it was such an interesting topic that we decided to devote this week's chapter to narrators, and in particular, what we love and hate about them. So this chapter is love and hate, and to complement that topic, Michelle has developed a unique cocktail for us.
So this cocktail is called a thin line between love and hate, and what it's going to consist primarily of is tequila, because that is in fact the alcohol that we all love and hate simultaneously. I'm going to start with some grenadine, because that's going to give the nice pink flavor and also fantastic coloring. Just do like a half a shot each.
Is pink a flavor?
It's grenadine flavored. It gives it a nice color.
You said that pink flavor.
You know, pink flavor. That color.
It's like when people are talking about candles and they're like, oh, that's my favorite flavor. And I'm like, oh, you eat the candles?
You know, though, the smell and scent are so closely related. Like, it's pretty crazy how closely related they are. And then next I'm going to add some bitters, because there's nothing more bitter than love gone wrong, and hate. Of course, hate is always filled with bitterness, so we're going to add just a smidge of bitters as well. I'm not even going to measure, I'm just going to drip it in. Just a drip of it. Because you don't want anything to be too bitter.
It depends on how hateful you feel. You know, let your heart decide.
Let your heart decide how bitter you are. And then, of course, some triple sec, because, you know, why not? It requires that you use a large spoon. Now, what I've done earlier is I've mixed the tequila with some fresh lime juice. This is harder than it looks. And then you pour it over the back end of the spoon into the side of the drink. Let's see if it works.
Yeah.
And that creates a D-mark on the drink. Anyway, it's hard. It's hard to do. That's why you have to tip your bartenders, ladies and gentlemen, because they work hard for you. So let's try the drink.
Okay.
Now and see what we think.
Is it meant to be like a shot?
I mean, however you do your tequila, girl. I like it. It's good. Cheers.
All right. So let's start with favorite and not so favorite narrator. So let's start out, as all things, we should start with love. And this was difficult for me because I don't necessarily, and I should, but I don't necessarily, if I get really absorbed into the story, I'm not thinking of who is reading it. I'm just thinking that's the voice of the character, you know, and I don't think of it as a whole separate person. So I had to do a little bit of research for this to make sure that I wasn't like, we'll put that in later, you know.
Right.
So I will say that I'm just going to go straight out with my very favorite, and I'm going to give that to Davina Porter.
Okay.
I think she has a beautiful sounding voice. It's very melodious. I don't think she overacts, but she still imbues, you know, the emotion, and it all comes across. And I think that the first I heard from her was Mists of Avalon, and I did it as I think we both tend to do, where we just delve into the world and we do book after book after book. And so this was probably about 3 months of me listening to Davina Porter almost every day read Mists of Avalon. It's the retelling of, you know, the legend of King Arthur, but told from the perspective of Morgaine, and it's the women's perspective.
Right.
And it's a lot more sympathetic to the women characters, and Davina Porter just does a fabulous job with that. She also, I think she also did the Outlander books, which I wasn't a huge fan of, so I think I only heard the first one. But while I wasn't a fan of the actual story, the narration was wonderful. But she also did another book called The Miniaturist, and which if you haven't read, it's fabulous, and it's about this maid who goes to work in this house in Amsterdam. It's
So let me ask you this question: did you listen to those other books because of the narrator, or was it just so happens that it's the right genre and that she always chooses books that you like?
I did not. Well, I will seek her out now.
Okay.
But obviously, Miss of Avalon was the first that I'd listened to her, and I thought she was great. And then when I was listening to The Miniaturist, I was like, where have I heard this voice before?
Oh, okay.
And that's when I put it together that I like this specific narrator.
Okay.
And so, yes, now after the second, I was like, yes. And I think I've definitely become more aware of who's narrating, because it can go so wrong if you don't have a good narrator.
Right.
And then, so that's Davina Porter. Top. And my second one, also a female, is Terry Donnelly, who we've also spoken about because she narrated The Lady and the Unicorn. And Davina Porter has more of just like a straight, she just sounds nice to listen to. It's sort of like the Ella Fitzgerald of narration. I
don't know that I would say that Ella Fitzgerald just sounds nice to listen to. She's Ella Fitzgerald is speaks directly to my soul.
Well, I love Ella Fitzgerald too. Right, I'm just saying, but it's not sort of the difference between Ella Fitzgerald and, say, Janis Joplin. You have Ella Fitzgerald, who just has a beautiful, pure singing voice where you cannot find one. She's never hit it wrong. Just. But then there's something to be said about a voice who does have a little bit of imperfection, because it brings a different type of authenticity to it.
Right.
And I think Terry Donnelly is that for me. It's way she does the words, the sound is, it's just interesting to me. And the way she pronounces certain words is very interesting to me. And so she obviously did Lady and the Unicorn, but she's done a few other books too. One is Daughter of the Forest, which if you haven't read, I do recommend.
Right. I've not read it.
It is sort of a retelling. I don't know if it actually is a fairy tale or a folk story, but it's sort of like The Princess Swan, and there's this young girl, and she has 7 brothers.
Right.
And through various events, she gets drawn into this magical world, and a curse gets put on her where she can't speak. And anyways, it's a great story, and Terry Donnelly narrated that as well. And again, that her voice is just amazing. So those are kind of my top 2, and they are both women, and I wanted to be equal opportunity.
Oh, so you have a boy that you like as well.
So obviously Michael Kramer.
I mean,
obviously, and then I really love Nick Podell, but I've only heard him do Kingkiller.
Okay.
But I would love to seek out more books that he narrated, because he did such a great job with that. Getting just that there's that curiosity in his voice, and there is that little bit of So those are, I would say, are kind of my top favorites right now.
So I think my favorite narrator has been Michael Leslie, which is a chap, and he narrated a book called The Lightning Struck Heart. And I'm sure you guys have heard me chat about this book before, because it's been described by others as dragon porn. It is not, though, because the dragon, well, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it's not porn. Well, it's not dragon porn. There's some pretty descriptive sex scenes that happen in it. But I think, and this is what's funny about this book, is that it's filled with penis puns, and it's very, very sexual in outre, but the narrator had these unique voices for each of the characters that were absolutely hilarious. So I got on the story with this. I got on the airplane flying back from Arizona, and I only had one book downloaded. And so this was the book. And it was a book club book from a very conservative book club. So my expectations of the books were not that it was going to be this kind of book. So I started listening to it, and I was like, oh my God, I've downloaded the wrong book. This is clearly not the book that they wanted me to read, because it's very, very, very
dragon porn,
sexually oriented. There's a lot of sex happening in the book. And to make it more interesting than that, the sex that was happening in the book was between 2 males. Right? There really only is, in the whole book, maybe 2 female characters, and they are very minor characters. So it's very, which is not like me either, because I always want to support women, But this narrator is so funny, and the voices are so good. Like, I was in stitches the whole time laughing on the way back. That my coworkers were like, "What the hell are you listening to? That sounded hilarious." And I was like, "It is hilarious." But of course, I can't tell, people I work with.
And was it Michael Leslie doing all of the voices?
He did all of the voices. It was all him, but each character was so distinct that it felt like I could, I knew who was talking even before they said and so said. Like, he was so distinct. And the dragon's voice and the unicorn, who doesn't have a horn, spoiler alert. The characters were just so fun. And I was rooting for them the whole way. And the book is amazing. If you are at all squeamish about boy on boy sex, then maybe not listen to that one. But if you don't care, or you like that, or you enjoy it, or you think it's funny, then definitely I recommend anything by TJ Klune, because TJ Klune is funny too. But the narrator, specifically Michael Leslie, is phenomenal. In fact, if you look at Audible, it'll tell you, like, people will say the narrator made this book. I don't know if anybody else had done it, if I would have loved it the way I did, but I thought it was so funny.
Okay. Well, I think it brings up an interesting thing. So if we just talk about general traits that draw you in, what do you look for in a narrator? Like, what do you love? Like, that they do well, you're in it.
I feel like if the narrator, especially if it's a first person narration, if the narrator sounds like how I think the character should sound, that really works for me, right? Like, if the narrator, if when I'm listening to the narrator talk, I think, oh yeah, that's the character talking.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Then I'm more apt to like the story. If it's like a female perspective story that's told by a male narrator, I immediately am annoyed.
There's a disconnect.
Yeah, it's not, because I need to, like, feel like I'm listening to that person.
Right. I've noticed that too. Like, I think that I'm a huge Robin Hobb fan.
Right.
And her books have been narrated by several people because, the realm of the Elderlings is kind of the world that she's built, and there's different things going on. And one of her main characters is Fitz.
Right.
And then for me, it was very hard to get into that because he has a very cultured, speaking voice, and Fitz is not cultured at all. He's a bastard. He grew up like in the stables, and so there was this huge disconnect. And then after that series, there's a break where it goes into a different storyline that's happening in the same world, and then it comes back to Fitz's story in the next series, and it's a new narrator, and that narrator is amazing, and so I enjoyed it much more with the second narrator. And I think in general, I have a preference for British accents. I don't know why.
For me, it depends. Like, I really enjoy listening to a British accent, but if the accent is too monotone, even with its whatever, a monotone voice in a British accent will cause me to go off.
Right.
Like, I'm not paying attention. I don't hear the words. I just hear the sounds, and I don't, like, fully process them.
I think it's because I tend to read historical fiction or fantasy more than anything, and it just seems like an American accent wouldn't go with that. Do you think Americans in the early, maybe first century had British accents? Because they all came from England, right?
This is interesting, actually. Someone was telling me that the American accent today is more similar to the English accent when America was settled than the English accent now, because of the way that colonization occurs. The colony maintains the accent, whereas the originating country actually changes and develops. So it's more likely that we talk like Shakespeare in our accent than the British people do.
No.
Yeah.
Are you talking Boston and?
Right, because
I think in general, like, all the dialects are more similar than the actual British stuff.
I remember one time the British friend that I had telling me that most Southerners are very good at doing a British accent because and I didn't get it.
Right.
I'm not I don't have a very good tongue for languages, period. But I remember thinking, oh, interesting. There's a lot. If you look at it just linguistically, there's a lot more similarities between the Southern accent and the British accent than like the Boston accent and the British accent.
Well, I mean, you got to wonder that maybe some of the other accents, like the Boston accent or the New York accent, may have been influenced by other countries.
Right, because the heavy immigration to
New York is heavy. There's a lot of
Italian.
there's a lot of influences there of all kinds of accents.
And then Boston is very heavily Irish, I believe, and so maybe their accent took on more. Because if you look at the original 13 colonies,
right,
you know, they all have very different accents. So there has to be,
I'm sure that there's reasons,
somewhat influenced by the immigrants, different from just England.
Right, who settled?
Yeah, like where did the Germans go and what's that? You know, that would be fun to research.
Perhaps, absolutely.
Okay, moving on.
Let's put a bookmark in that.
Put a bookmark in that. Okay, so we are going to move on to what we hate.
Oh.
What we hate in narrators. Now, I will say it's just a general pet peeve of mine when the narration is too slow. And I know that you can fix that on most apps where you can speed up. But why should we have to? Why are they talking so slow?
Because some people
do they love the sound of their voice that much?
Some people like to hear it slow. I think not everyone wants to hear things fast. Some people need it to be spoon.
But some of
really
it,
slowly.
like I'm listening to The Bear and the Nightingale right now.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not even a auditory learner. So a lot of times I do need to listen to it somewhat slow.
Right.
And so I usually don't speed it up. I listen, but it's like the equivalent of the large print in a book. You're just like, okay. So I don't know how, it would probably take you 3 months to get through a book with the pace that you read the book. Did you listen to the audiobook?
Well, I always listen to the audiobook, and I listen to it probably at 1.5 speed.
Okay, I'm at 1.25.
But I didn't really have a problem with her.
Well, no, and I liked her little. She does a good job on the Russian accent. It's just, why are you reading it that slow? I don't.
Also,
understand.
I feel like that book in particular for me was slow paced. Mm-hmm. Like the book itself was slow paced, not just the person speaking. Okay. Like there was a lot of time spent on stuff that I didn't care that much about in that particular story. I didn't like it. I thought you'd like it because of the things that you like versus the things that I like.
I do like
it, but
I
didn't really enjoy the book.
Well, we'll see how it ends. There's.
So who's your who's the author that you hate?
Oh, so the author.
Let's talk about your hated narrator.
Yeah, so my hated narrator. Now I'm not going to say Jim Dale because as I said on the last one,
Jim Dale isn't hateful.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I didn't mean to imply that I hate Jim Dale.
Just that you like Neil Gaiman better. I get it. It's fine. It's cool. Whatever.
Well, I wouldn't even say Neil Gaiman's one of my favorite. Like if I'm going to put it out there, my absolute. People I hate. All right. So there's one that I've only actually listened to one book by her.
Why would you subject yourself over and over?
Exactly. And her name is Tara Sands. And I feel a little bad about this. What if they ever hear?
Well, then they should know.
Anyways, I know that
constructive feedback.
I know that they may pick her because she has a young sounding voice. And so if there is a young female protagonist, it seems, she does convey youth, but like the most annoying, grating voice of it's not like she's a valley girl, but it's that sort of.
What's her name?
Tara Sands, and the book that I listened to by her is called Boundary Side, and it's a great book. And I tolerated it because I tolerated her voice because it was such a great story, but it's just so grating and annoying, and I get it a little bit, and I get why some people may think she's perfect for those roles because there's a certain amount of pluckiness to it, but it's just annoying. It's so annoying. And so much so that there's another book that I love that I was reading the book and wanted to listen to it as well while I was in my car.
Right.
And it was The Language of Flowers, which is also a great book, but I aborted trying to listen to it in the car because her voice it just
hurts you.
It just hurts me. It hurts my heart.
I feel that same way about Caitlin Davies, like almost exactly what you're saying. She did a book called Goddess of the Sea by PC Cast. I make fun of it. Like whenever I think about it, for an eternity, Christine, an eternity. Like she just had this like terrible voice, and the book was trite anyway. But then with her voice on top of it, it was like like a B-rated book. I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It was terrible.
It was terrible. And
but same as what you're saying, which is like too young and too.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Do you think we feel that way about young voices because we are kind of past our youth?
No, I mean I don't mind young voices. I think as long as they sound.
I think I do have a preference for older voices. Like if you think of like Dark Tower, George Guidall.
I didn't read it.
Oh, he's like, you could just tell the voice alone tells centuries.
Oh.
Is centuries old. It just adds a bit of gravitas to it, and you just trust it more. I don't know. I do tend to like older voices. I think unless it's romance,
right,
and then not so much.
Yeah. Same.
I also tend not to like when one voice tries to do too many voices. And I know it's interesting because one of the voices you love.
Yeah, no.
But it's hard to do well.
They have to be good at it. You can't.
And it's a rare thing for them to be good at it.
So, the one that I hate the most, his name is Dick. Dick Hill. He narrated the Dragon Riders of Pern, which I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't have any idea what the Dragon Riders of Pern was and who Anne McCaffrey was and her importance and significance. Like, I should know that, but I did not know that. So when I started listening to the book, I thought it was just some random book that I was reading for a book club, and I did not know. And I think that if I had known, I may have been more dispositioned? No. Predisposed to enjoy it. But because I didn't understand that and I didn't know that, I had no, like, whatever, and I absolutely hated it. Like a vitriol reaction. Like, I was like, make him stop talking straight away. But I listened to the whole thing because I needed to listen to it for a book club. But this Dick Hill guy, I think he made it worse. Like, his voice was so condescending, and he was blah. And it was a female perspective,
right?
But it was told by a male, and it was so sexist, and the overtures, and then listening to this guy talk about, like, girl feelings, which were already wrong in my opinion. It made me want to just turn off my car audio and run around in circles. I was angry all the time. Like, I talk about how listening to audiobooks makes me better in traffic. This made me worse. I was angry all the time. And what's funny is that, like, halfway through listening to it, I was talking to somebody else who was also reading the book for the same book club, and he was like, that was written by a woman, right? And that inflamed me even more. Like, I was like,
yeah, I would say
so mad.
As a rule, one of the things that drives me nuts is when male narrators try to do a female voice.
Especially when they're like a sexy female voice.
Yeah, they almost always get it wrong.
Now, I'm wondering, did Anne McCaffrey have a choice on that one?
I don't know if Anne McCaffrey had a choice or not.
Do you know the book? Did you listen to it?
No, I haven't listened. I read some.
Do you like Dragon? See, everyone I know is like, oh, Dragon Riders of Pern is like the best thing ever, and I was like, I literally had like,
it poisoned it for you.
I was so angry.
You've been poisoned.
Like, and then I feel like I should have, because now I've learned so much about Anne McCaffrey and what she's done for women writers, and especially in the fantasy genre, and how important she is, and how important those books were, and I feel a little bit guilty, but the anger is still there, and I cannot let it go.
We'll put a few more bitters in your next drink, because I
think that's real. Like,
that's what your heart's telling.
Dick Hill.
Dick.
God.
What a dick.
I mean, he's a dick. I don't know if it was him or if it's the writing or what it is. I can't separate the two. They're together now.
Right.
But
well, that's the risk when you listen to the audiobook versus actually reading the book. You're handing over. Right. And I wish authors, considered that and insisted on having a say in who's going to be the voice of their story, because it can totally influence. I mean, it does. It is deciding for you who the voice of that book is. And if you decide you don't like it, it's very hard to separate it from the writing.
You can't go back, because those characters now forever sound like that.
Yeah. Well, he did the whole first 3 books. And then afterwards...
I bet you didn't get past book 1.
I didn't get past book 1.
There's no way.
I wasn't going further down that rabbit hole. You don't understand. I was angry. Like,
I have to know. I'm going to look this up later.
Female narrator after that.
I mean, that makes more sense because it's from her perspective.
It took 3 books for them to get enough hate mail for them to be like, okay.
From her perspective, the books, and this is an old. Fiction is like an old white man who like had no concept of like any. I don't know. Like,
it's like that movie with Jack Nicholson where he's a writer. And they're like, how do you write women so well? And he's like, well, I just take out all logic and...
As good as it gets?
Yeah, as good as it gets. It's sort of that kind of a thing, only he's not even good at it.
I mean, no,
Yeah.
Right.
So back to Robin Hobb. There is a female narrator
right.
that does my personal favorite series in the book, which is the Live Ship Traders.
Right.
And Anne Flosnick is her name,
Uh-huh.
and I have a very love-hate relationship with her because she has an interesting tone and an interesting the cadence that she reads at, and the choices that she makes when it's very engaging.
Right.
Very much pulls you in. She's very good at creating the personality of the character. But there are certain affectations that she does that I'm like, why are you doing that, Anne? Why? It's distracting and it makes me hate you. Just stop. Just stop. I wish I could write her a letter.
I mean, you probably could. You could probably add her at Twitter.
I'm pretty sure she's just waiting on my feedback.
I mean, she probably gets additional feedback. Or there could be people who love those affectations because that's, there's a thin line between love and hate.
Right.
And some things that we absolutely hate, other people might absolutely love. I mean, there may be somebody out there who thought that Dick Hale did a smashing job.
Right.
And were upset when book 4 was narrated by someone else. I mean, it's possible. Those people exist, I'm sure.
So another angle to this hate is often, I would say most of the time, I hate when authors narrate their own books. And it's surprising, you
Neil Gaiman aside, I'm sure.
Neil Gaiman aside, because he's amazing.
Right.
But almost you feel like who could you trust more than the author to read it to you? But they end up usually not being able to read in an engaging way.
So there was this episode of Bones. Did you guys ever watch that show, Bones?
Yep.
And it's based off an author who writes books, right? The whole show is based off of, like a real author in real life, where Bones decides that she wants to narrate her book because she doesn't like the person that's narrating it, and everybody hates the way she does it. And they're like, and then at the end she decides not to do it because obviously she can pick up on, well, I mean, I don't know if she can pick up on social cues. It's kind of anti-character, but that's what makes me think of.
Yeah, well, it's exactly that way. So Donna Tartt is a great example of that. She writes so beautifully.
Yeah.
She did Secret History and The Goldfinch, I think is what everybody kind of knows.
Oh, it's a movie now.
It is a movie now. I haven't seen it though.
I haven't seen it or read the book.
Well, the book is it's not my favorite of hers, but it is a beautifully written book. It's a little overlong, and especially it's so easy to get focused on the story that you're just like, come on, this is taking too long. What's going to happen next? But for me, it was a refreshing reminder that sometimes you read just to appreciate the beauty of the language and the writing.
Yeah, sometimes.
And it's just so, I mean, she's just such a beautiful writer, not a beautiful narrator.
No.
It's kind of painful.
Ooh.
And again, I hope she doesn't hear this because she's a beautiful writer, but please pick someone else to narrate your books, please.
The only ones I think I've done is, Gaiman books, and then The Last Unicorn.
Well, did you hear Patrick Rothfuss read Slow Regard for Silent Things?
I did.
I thought he did a great job.
I think he did pretty good. Yeah.
So I would give him credit for sure. And of course, David Sedaris, which
I haven't listened to David Sedaris, although I love him.
His reading of his own books are obviously amazing. He does a really great job. But he also did a cast recording of a book called Lincoln in the Bardo, and it was like probably the best multi-cast recording I've ever heard, and definitely recommended. And he did a great job at that. And so, because I wondered if he is just good at reading his own work because he crafts it and he obviously spends a lot of time on it and he's in his head a lot, and so it's very easy to convey that. But this was a whole different character, and he was amazing with that. So I feel like David Sedaris could probably
he's a comedian,
be an actor,
right? He's funny,
but I think he could act.
I think being funny though requires the kind of timing that you need. Probably be a pretty good actor. Like most comedians are good actors, I think.
Yeah, but I wouldn't call him a comedian. He doesn't do stand up though. You know what I mean? He's more of just like a comedic essayist sort of a thing.
So talking about things we hate, I want to talk a little bit about Vicious because I know that you're listening to it right now.
I read it. I did not
listen to it. Oh, you did not listen because did you try listening to it and hate the guy?
No, the audiobook wasn't I don't do Audible, I do library and audiobook wasn't available.
So
sorry.
I like the narrator fine. I'm not a huge fan of him, but he has a little bit of like a William Shatner-esque kind of thing where he pauses in unusual places, and people tend to hate it. Like you'll find out tonight when we go to anything What Scary Clowns book club that they're going to all hate him. I feel like it.
Okay.
But I don't. So I think that sometimes, like, the style of the way someone talks, like, I like it if it's okay. It's stylized. Eventually I'll get used to it. But if you have, like, a problem with weird pauses or strange ways, then sometimes narrators will rub you the wrong way.
I could see that. Yeah. And then, so going back to the idea that comedians would just naturally make good actors, I would say actors would not naturally make good narrators. And you would think that they would, but one of my most hated audiobook experiences is Will Wheaton.
No!
Doing Ready Player One.
You've gotta be kidding
Oh my
me.
gosh, I hate it.
I love Will Wheaton.
Hey, I love Will Wheaton. You know, I love his tabletop series, you know. Love it. Would love to play board games with that man. But listening to him read Ready Player One was excruciating.
I have to be honest with you. I love Will Wheaton,
and his narration.
I legit have sought out books that Will Wheaton has narrated and read them because two things. First off, he's an excellent chooser of stuff. Like all of the books that he narrates,
excellent
are fantastic.
Taste. Not disputing it.
Second of all, he's phenomenal.
He's adorable.
What?
He is adorable.
Love Will Wheaton?
Love him on Big Bang Theory.
April.
But I do not want to listen to him read a 11 million chapter book ever again. Did you
hear Red Shirts though? He's so good.
He over enunciates every word, and he puts in these pauses.
I could not.
And I'm thinking, is it like a Shatner influence from his?
He never worked with Shatner.
I know, but he probably researched it for
universe, I guess.
Yeah. No, it just, I don't get it. And it's so cold. There's no warmth in his voice.
Disagree.
We'll just
disagree. I think. I can't believe that you would say that.
Well, this would make an interesting listener poll because it is a polarizing topic. How did you feel about
you're the
Will
only
Wheaton?
person in the world?
No, I feel strongly that there will be some.
Iris, have you listened to Will Wheaton narrate anything?
No.
I can't speak to his other performances because I avoid his audiobook narration now. But I can tell you, Ready Player One,
I loved it.
I loved
it so much, and I loved it. He did Red Shirts.
It made me not like the characters.
Well,
he just isn't likable without his face.
I am gonna have to no. I disagree. I love Will Wheaton and I love his narration.
No.
And I can't even.
Actually, I'm looking online.
Yeah.
April is one of many.
Oh, there are many who agree with April. Well, I guess that's probably true.
Will Wheaton has no business narrating audio.
Who said that?
He doesn't have business because he has so many other businesses at which he excels. You know, I get that there's books I love. I don't think I'd be good narrating them though.
I don't think that I think that he's an excellent narrator and I enjoy listening to his voice. And I like how he does the characters and I love the books he chooses and I trust him.
You know what I think would be fun? I think it would be fun to have a little contest of people that we know, have them read like 2 minutes of their favorite book then out loud, and then let's judge them.
I feel like no, April. That would not be fun for anyone but you.
I would love to hear how people
I would too, but I don't want to judge my friends. I definitely would want you judging my friends.
It is.
Doesn't like Will Wheaton or.
Well, I can say this. I can say from experience that I have, not that great at reading books aloud.
Okay.
Except for children's books, which I'm amazing at. I did a lot of babysitting. When I was in 5th grade, I was chosen to go read in the library to the kindergartners and first graders. I worked at a daycare, and children from other classes would be allowed to come and listen to me read the book. And I think it's a little bit easier to read a children's book because it is a very, over the top, you can read a little bit slower and they're short and you just can really be.
There's only one sentence on each page.
Right. And you can be a little whimsical and it's great. And with that in mind, this kind of ties in with celebrities not generally being good at narrating audiobooks.
Right.
There is a BBC series called CBeebies. And it's like I guess it's sort of like their PBS story time for children.
Right.
It's like, and these actors will come and they will read aloud children's books. And they're all amazing, but the one that was most surprising to me, and it could be because I, who am not very big on celebrity crushes,
right,
he would be mine, and it is Tom Hardy.
Oh.
And, he normally plays such a tough, like that silent,
his voice too.
Dangerous kind of man.
Wait, wasn't that the guy that's Venom?
Yes. Although that's not my favorite movie by him.
He looked like shit in that whole film.
Oh, in Inception, he was awesome.
In Inception, he was awesome.
Yeah, but you would never think, I'd like for him to read my children a story, right?
No.
It's not, you don't get that sort of, vibe.
Mm-hmm.
He is so amazing. I've watched everyone that he's been in multiple times, and that's my surprise for you after the podcast. There's one in particular that I think will speak to you because it is about a party where everyone is required to wear a hat. The party depends on it. And he is so charming and just the perfect blend of, it's silly, but he's taking it totally serious.
Right.
And he's got a dog with him named Woody that's sleeping on his lap, and he has a party hat on. It is so adorable, and we're going to watch it when the podcast is over.
So I want to talk about Adam Baldwin for a second.
Who doesn't?
From Firefly. So I know the problem with Adam Baldwin is that I know too much about him personally.
Which one is that one?
He's the one from Firefly, plays Jane.
From where?
Firefly television show.
One of the Baldwin brothers was
He's not related to Stephen Baldwin.
He's
called Adam Baldwin.
Oh, I thought you were saying Alec
Baldwin.
They
don't own that name.
Oh, the tall blonde guy?
With the Jane hat. Jane.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you.
You're destroying my calm. I know too much about him from what he believes politically and stuff, and I disagree with him a little bit. That colored the experience so much that I think even though the book itself, it was like a short story, even though it also was colored with that same sort of a libertarian sort of vibe to it, which I know he has that, and I think that it made me enjoy it. It was called The Adventures of Tom Strand. It's Tom Stranger.
Oh, okay.
Have you guys read this? Tom Stranger? It's like a short story about he's like an insurance man of the galaxy, and he goes around and tries and save people from destruction of the planets to get destroyed or whatever. And it's really funny and it's very clever, and Adam Baldwin does a very good job narrating because I know that about him personally, that he is sort of conservative, and the book also had some tendencies to lean that direction. I felt like I didn't enjoy it as much.
This is part of the reason why I don't think you should really research celebrities that you enjoy.
I don't.
Because once you find out some of,
Because everyone has something about them that you're not going to like.
Well, Benedict Cumberbatch and...
I love him.
And Tom Hiddleston, they both narrate, that.
What?
Books as well.
Who, Tom Hiddleston?
And...
Well, I only know about Cumberbatch because when we were doing a fundraising event and we all had to dress up like penguins, he was narrating, it wasn't an audiobook, but he was narrating a nature series.
Yeah, and the way the word penguins wrong.
Yeah, I can't even say it the way he was saying it.
He didn't say it the same way anytime either. He kept pronouncing penguins differently. Penguin. I don't know, he kept doing it differently each time. It was pretty funny. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've kind of explored the love-hate relationships we have with audiobook narrators.
And yet again, April and I vehemently disagree.
On some things. And we're going to try something new with this chapter, and we're going to have Iris add in a bookend for us.
So, Iris, can you come near the mic? Come here.
We beckon you.
We're beckoning you.
Since you all have been so very, how do you call it? Judgmental.
Oh.
Opinionated.
Well, I feel like that's the point of the
chapter,
was to be judgmental.
This is a little tidbit, so I'm just going to give you a couple of things that goes into producing an audiobook.
Okay.
And so these are the top points.
Okay.
Most of these audio performers, so to speak, they were formerly stage actors. So that's one of the things.
That checks out.
That checks out.
The audiobook the industry has an Oscars. So we should look into that.
Oh, for sure. We should definitely watch the Oscars of audiobooks.
What do they call it?
The audio awards to honor the best.
I think they should call them Audis.
Oh, they should totally call them Audis. I got an Audi.
I've got an Audi.
Most of the time
I got
they
an Audi
only
2000.
get
From the year 2000.
I got
most of the time they only get a night to prepare.
Yeah.
So they're not very familiar with.
They have to read the whole book in one night.
No. So what happens is usually like on Amazon they have like a thing where you can go in and submit that you need someone to read your book, and then people will go and take it and they will give you like a quick 10-minute or chapter segment so that the author can then choose who they want, and then they can choose to pay the person that does it either. Sometimes they pay them based off like sales, and sometimes they just give them a flat fee. Yep. But a lot of times they just get it and then they send it right away to the author so they can hear the voice and see if it matches.
And anybody can do it?
Anybody can do it. Yeah.
And then some of them record from home. So
I imagine most of them do.
Yes.
Yeah, you'd want to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And it may take over a month to record a book.
That checks out.
They don't take breaks in between books. So that's probably why sometimes you get hit and misses with some of the books, especially. I would think how it goes into flowing from one type of book into another,
right,
affects,
Well, I think even listening to books, I can often tell when it's a new recording because their voice is just slightly different. They say, and there's a sudden but slight change in the way that they're narrating. Like maybe they sound less tired. All of a sudden they sound a lot more energized or less hoarse. And it's very subtle, but there are times I'm like, oh, this must be a different day.
Also, authors.
I don't never see that.
Not all authors. Most authors do not get to pick who they narrate.
No?
So who picks?
So they're the production company?
There's an association for the publisher.
Like the publishing house?
The publishing house.
Lip balm is essential.
Okay, I'm just going to put this out there. If I were a, successful writer, and you know how hard it is to become a successful writer, and I put in all that effort, I would insist that I have at least a 50% vote in who narrates my books.
So I also was...
I require it. Like the top, I don't go topless and I pick the narrator. That's in my clause. I don't know how many times authors are asked to go topless.
I mean, just for the audience. Only at the Audio Awards.
But what do they call that a clause?
Yeah,
that's
for
called
sure.
A clause in legal terms.
Things.
It's not a very well known
things for that.
Legal
term.
And
I also heard that once they choose someone, like once an author says, okay, you're going to do my book or whatever, then the author then doesn't have any way to go back and say, I need you to do this differently or I want you to pronounce this name differently. Like they have it, they do it, it's theirs, and that's it. That's the end of it. That's all the control.
So you can't trust that
the author has no control after that. They just give it to them, they do it, and then it's done.
I can't believe that. You would think, especially like with fantasy, when all these words and names are completely invented, they'd at least have a discussion like, how is this pronounced?
And they may have discussions up front, but once it's handed over, it's handed over. That's it. That's the end. The author has no way to give feedback, has no way to make changes. It's handed over to the narrator.
An interesting tidbit here too. They avoid going out and eating cheese before recording.
Oh, I've heard it can make you very mucusy. Milk too. Any kind of dairy can make your...
Which is why it's not practical to eat ice cream when you have a cold.
Exactly.
Because of the mucus and also because sugar feeds viruses.
And then last, you need to love reading to love the job.
Well, I mean, that checks out all the...
Yeah.
Well, not everybody loves their job. I mean, I love my job.
I cannot imagine that audiobook narrators make a lot of money. And so I would think you would only do it if you loved it.
I mean, I feel like they probably make a living.
Oh, yeah, they make a solid living. But if you hated to do it...
Like, why would you do it? Why would you choose that?
Yeah, you could just go, become, open a bookstore or an ice cream parlor. Why would you necessarily choose...
Well, opening a bookstore and ice cream parlor takes a lot of capital.
Okay, well then
I'm just saying.
Just become a radiology manager. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's just such a specific job that if you hated it, there's a million other non-specific jobs that you could do.
Yeah, and I've also noticed that narrators tend to stay in the same genre, right? So like if it's a fantasy narrator, they tend to narrate a lot of fantasy books and romance and
they
a
get
lot
typecast.
I don't know that they get typecast or if that's how they choose it. Like if they just choose books that they were going to like anyway because they
I would
like
say
sci-fi.
that it's not true for a very close runner-up in my faves category, and that is Simon Vance.
Oh yeah?
He does a little bit of everything. I heard him do Brent Weeks' Lightbringer series, and he was amazing at it. He also did a Sarah Waters book that is one of my favorite creepy, ghosty stories.
Oh.
But it's not fantasy at all because it's more of like an unreliable narrator type story where
I don't like those.
It's called Little Stranger, and it is.
Wait. Have I read Little Stranger?
Sarah, it's a. Whether or not this house is haunted is up for debate. Are the people who live there just a little
crazy?
mad?
Or, like that Nicole Kidman film.
Yeah. Oh, the others. Which, yes, sort of a similar thing. Yes.
Okay.
But a little bit more. Well, obviously, one's the movie and one's a book, but the writing is very good.
The story is a story.
Yeah,
is a story.
But that actually is. I remember when I saw that. The others.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not a huge Nicole Kidman fan,
right.
I remember thinking I like that better than The Sixth Sense. And The Sixth Sense, they came out at about the same time.
No, they didn't.
Well, I watched them at about the same time. I was, a single mother and I didn't see the things when they first came out. But I remember thinking that I remember thinking the others plot twist was a lot more impactful, and I just thought the others was a much better movie than The Sixth Sense, but The Sixth Sense is the one that everybody was losing their shit over
because of Bruce Willis. I mean, really, and Haley Joel Osment. I see dead people.
Yeah.
All right, so should we wrap up? All right. Well, thank you for joining us for Chapter 2 of the Book Eaters podcast, and we hope that in the future, all of the books that you listen to are those that you love, and that you don't discover any that you hate.
Happy reading. Not my best work.
I'm going to leave that in.